Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Whiskey Uncorked. My name is Brian, and we are back today with another review. This time we're reviewing another special edition. This time, at least for me, a much anticipated annual release in the 2024 Laphroaig Cairdeas. So the Laphroaig Cairdeas is one of these annual releases, particularly from Islay, but really in the whole of Scotland, that I've really started to look forward to. I have gotten bottles of, I believe this would be the 5th year in a row of picking up that year's Cairdeas, going back to, I believe, the port and wine release. And they have all been good. At the very least, good up to great. And I'll get into this a little bit more after we actually do the review. I'll jump into the review fairly quickly today, but really the Laphroaig Cairdeas is really become this epitome of what a Scotch special release should be. Now, why do I say that? Well, there's a few different reasons. Number one, every year is noticeably different. Like Ardbeg, I've always felt like their persistent use of refill casks and some of these other quirks of their distilling or aging process can produce good whiskey, but they're not significantly different, oftentimes, at least not for me, from each other. Not that they aren't different, but they're subtle differences. And then obviously, there's kind of the price component of like, what am I paying for? If it's only subtly different than something else that you have in your core range or whatnot, like, does this really make sense? So you're getting a pretty distinct release every single year. Number two, they are always good. Even their Warehouse 1 release, which was questionable, but why that existed, was still good whiskey. It felt a little off just because it's basically a more expensive version of the 10-year-old cask strength with no age statement and lower ABV. But even that whiskey was good. So you're getting a consistent quality, putting some faith that when you buy that bottle, you're at least going to get something that's worth your time and money. And speaking of money, they are generally speaking affordable. Up until this version, they have all been under $100 for 52-ish% ABV and some significant cask influence outside of that Warehouse 1, which is always going to be more expensive. Those casks are going to cost more. So you're getting something that's at least relatively affordable, that the masses can afford. It's something that's going to be good quality, and year after year, you're getting something that is at least somewhat unique and different. Now, it's okay if they do special releases that are aimed at the super high end or super high age statement and whatnot, but when you're focusing something towards like the whiskey drinker, those are three things that really seem to be important. And Laphroaig really has knocked those out of the park year in and year out. But I'm going to stick to my promise, jump into this review quickly, at least maybe a little bit more quickly than normal. And let's talk about the bottle. Let's talk about what this version is. So the Laphroaig Cairdeas, which I believe Cairdeas means friendship. It's, yes, it is Gaelic for friendship. And they do this release every year as part of their Friends of Laphroaig program. It's not limited to the group or anything like that, but, and you can sign up for free anyways. This is in celebration of their 30th anniversary of their Friends of Laphroaig, program. And, they've gone back and revisited some other favorite editions from the lineup of the Cairdeas releases. So what exactly are they celebrating? Well, back in 2019, one of the more popular releases of the Cairdeas line was their Triple Wood. And then in 2021, they released a Pedro Jimenez influenced version as well. I never tried the Triple Wood. That would have been the year before, I believe. I started getting these. I'm pretty sure I could have bought one. I remember seeing them on the shelves. Didn't. And, we all make mistakes. But the PX version is very, very, very good, as really are all of them. But they are distinct, and some people are going to have preferences for one edition or another. But this particular one is aged in ex-bourbon, quarter casks, which they have as part of their core range, the quarter cask edition of just their regular spirit. I believe that's 48%. It's very, very good, much better than the 10-year-old, the standard 10-year-old. And then they took those barrels and they combined them and finished all of that spirit in PX casks, hence the triple wood, because there's 3 different types of casks involved, and then the PX sherry influence finish. One other thing that's important about this release, or interesting about this release, is that it has a 10-year-old age statement. Most of the other Cairdeas releases have not been age stated, at least not recently. I haven't looked back to see all of the different editions going back over 5-6 years ago, or more than 5 or 6 years ago, forgive me. So 10-year-old age statement, 3 different kinds of wood. I was anticipating that this was probably not going to be sitting at that $90 price point, which is typically about the average that you find these here in the States. And sure enough, this has crept up to about that $100, or as I paid for here in California from K&L Wines, $105 plus tax. So I believe it was the Ardbeg Spectacular review. I mentioned I hope that Laphroaig could keep these at that $100 price point or below. And generally speaking, I know in Binny's in Chicago, that was $99.99, so they were able to do it there. Here, at least from K&L, it was another $5. I was happy to pay it. It is what it is. I hope most editions can stay below that $100 price point for as long as possible, just because it feels like that line in the sand. And if anything, this still came in at about $25 less than the Ardbeg Spectacular, which was also, 6.4% ABV lower and had less significant cask influence on it. Yes, it did have older whiskey in it. I believe, if I want to remember correct, if I can remember, it was like 13 or 14-year-old Ardbeg that would have been aging in refill port casks from Glenmorangie for their Quinta Ruban line. There's probably some younger stuff in there as well, but there was some older whiskey in there. But I think this is probably going to have a more impactful influence on particularly Islay-loving Scotch drinkers. All right, so this, as I mentioned, this did come in at the 52.4%. That is not cask strength. The 2.4 is for 2024. Last year's was 52.3. I believe there were some cask strength releases for a little while, and then they kind of reverted back to this kind of traditional, slightly watered down or slightly diluted version. At the end of the day, it's probably going to increase availability to some degree and help keep that price down a little bit. 52 point whatever is a pretty solid ABV. Not really complaining there at all. Lastly, tasting notes on the bottle, just in case you don't like mine. On the front, it just says tastes like fruit, ginger, and peat. It's a pretty simplistic thing, but I believe on the back here, it says tastes like rich, deep, and indulgent with intense sweet peat smoke, dried fruits, and crystallized ginger. All right, without further ado, let's see what this is nosing and tasting like today. I have had a few pours out of this, including knocking one over. In the chaos of the desk. So my entire room smells like Laphroaig right now. It is sad, but at least I have been able to enjoy at least some of it. But anyway, let's get into the nosy notes and tasting notes and give this thing a score. On the nose, hopefully I'm not peat blind by just inhaling the peat smoke that has been filling my office here, but here we go. So right away, I was getting some pipe tobacco, pipe smoke there, which I don't think I'd really picked up before. Yeah, smells like cigars and pipes. Wow, how fun. That is something completely new, just put up to my nose and it just hit me. One thing I will say about this is the nose has been changing pretty significantly since I've opened this a few days back, and it's been evolving ever since. So with more oxygen, it seems to be opening up a little bit more. So obviously with Laphroaig, you're looking for the medicinal band-aids and iodine. Those are not notes that I pick up super easily. I was definitely getting much more of an industrial quality, kind of hot asphalt, that sort of thing, that sort of peat, Kilchoman style. That's probably the one I think of the most. Balakin can have it as well. But I started to get a little bit more of the iodine on this until I picked up the 10-year-old sherry. I poured myself a little bit of their 10-year-old sherry release, and that was like, oh, well, this is much more iodine forward. So generally speaking, this hasn't been a super typical Laphroaig for me. It has been a sweeter smoke, as the notes on the bottle and the box have said. And just now, I'm getting much more of a tobacco-y pipe smoke than this hyper medicinal version. I think that has a lot to do with the PX. There comes the asphalt is kind of coming back. Not super heavy and dense like some of the big time like Kilhomans that I've had, or even some of the Balikins, but it's definitely there. There is some sweetness here. It's dark. Like everything here is really dark. It's more of a raisin, dried raisins. The dried fruit note, sure, but definitely more on the raisiny side. It's like burnt toffee or something like that as well, but it's definitely intriguing, and let's see where that leads us. Let's try it on the palate. First sip, here we go. Cheers. Still, this bottle is changing a lot for me. Even from the dram I had last night, it's changed. But first things first, just the texture, the mouthfeel is fantastic. Last year's was as well, right? Super viscous, just definitely has that really nice thick texture, and it's just kind of a dream to drink, I guess. The flavor ride, the evolution is really nice as well. You get this real smooth transition and the crescendo of flavor into the finish, which lasts forever. Just overall, the experience of drinking this whiskey is really, really fantastic, to be honest. So last night I was getting much more of like a decadent and rich like coffee and brownies with some like caramel drizzle and that sort of thing. Maybe even some butterscotch. This is probably a little bit more akin to the notes that they're giving on the box and the label. But since I was so focused on just the drinking experience on the first sip, I'm gonna go in for a second one right away. Here we go. Yeah, you start with that real nice creamy caramel, like some nice sweetness, not too sugary sweet up front. And then, yeah, you transition into that kind of peppery. I see where they say ginger. Ginger is not a note that comes naturally to me when drinking Scotch whiskey in general, I suppose. But I get more, I think I call it out more as like a white pepper and something else, right? There's this pepperiness that isn't quite like black pepper. I get a little bit more of the ginger quality on this now that I'm thinking about it because of the notes on the bottle, but there's a lot going on. There's a nuttiness, there's like some almonds or almond skins. You're getting a lot of those raisins, but it's a little bit sweeter. It's really well integrated. There's a good amount of complexity here. There's some like graham cracker, like some cinnamon graham cracker or something like that. The quarter casks, which are, so they're smaller casks meant to impart a greater oakiness to the whiskey. Those put in a lot of work on this bottle. Even at 10 years old, you are getting the oakiness that's standing up to like that PX influence and everything. It's really well done. All right, I'm gonna do one more sip, see if I can pick out anything else. There's a lot I can pick out, but I'm gonna try to keep whittling it down without taking forever, but here we go. So I think here is like the balance between the sweetness and the spice is, I think, really kind of where your mind gets drawn. The peat itself isn't nearly as dirty and industrial on the palate. I was getting more of that yesterday. So like I said, yesterday it was like this dirty coffee fudge brownie with like caramel drizzle, especially on the back end. Much more decadent than I'm getting now. Now it's a little bit brighter. I think that ginger quality is coming through a little bit more. You could almost argue there's like a touch of like lemon, but citrus in general. There's a little tartness there. Again, I think you can probably interpret this a couple different ways, but we'll stick with ginger. I think that's a pretty apt description combined with the peppery nature of it. But That, and then the oak. There's some baking spice type sensations here. Got a little bit of bourbon cinnamon quality to it, but full flavored. The finish lasts forever, and the reality is that this is a really, really good edition of the Laphroaig Cairdeas. So this really has everything. It's sweet, it's spicy, it's peaty without being overwhelmingly peat. Like my last review was the Octomore. Totally different style of whiskey, totally different style of peatiness. This is strong on the peat, but you don't really think about it. It's not really presenting itself as this hyper smoky Islay whiskey. It is, if you think. It's just really well integrated together, and it's kind of got everything that you want, right? It's sweet, it's spicy, it's oaky, it's rich, it's decadent, it's got some tartness to it. It's just a whole lot happening at one time, and combine that with the mouthfeel and the length of the finish, and this is a dream. As I said, this is what a special release, and really Laphroaig Cairdeas in general, what a special release from a Scotch whiskey distillery should be. So in terms of a score, another one I struggled with, right? We're talking 8 or 9 territory here, and I think this is one where if you really kind of just add up everything that it is, and like this is supposed to be a special edition as well. I think that there's something to be said about that. This isn't just another Cairdeas release. This is a celebration of the 30 years of Friends of Laphroaig, and that they are taking previously loved versions and kind of combining them, and they're actually like kind of pushing the hype a little bit, and they kept the price reasonably close to where it was. I don't think there should be any surprise that, at least here in the US, where you can generally expect to pay between $80 to $100, usually in that $90 range, and then this kind of bumped up just to that $100 and $105 range. You might even still be able to get it cheaper where you are, but I don't, with the 10-year-old age statement. Like this is a special edition of a special edition, and to be honest, it's living up to what it's been billed as. So I think I want to reward it a little bit more. I think maybe like this would be a high 8, just because it's a bold whiskey. It's something that there is complexity there, but it's happening at the same time. It's loud, there's some elegance here as well, but generally speaking, like this is a flavor bomb whiskey. And with Scotch, at least for me, sometimes when it really, the complexity and the layers really start to sing, that's when you get into that 9 and possibly 10 territory, where kind of these big bold flavor bombs would always kind of struggle to an extent to get to that height. But there have been some, one of which being the Port Charlotte OLC, which I reviewed not too long ago, and I gave that one a 9. And I think for me, this one is pretty close, very, very close to that similar level of enjoyment when I drink it. And so I'm going to bump it up a little bit and give it a 9 out of 10, which is wow. So value wise, at $100 in 2024, this is a great value at $100. I said I picked up another bottle of the OLC. The OLC MSRP was well over $100 even when that came out. All of those Port Charlotte special releases, which are generally in that like 9-year-old range, maybe slightly higher ABV, but are also using very interesting cask influences, those are significantly more expensive than $100. Again, I paid $105 plus tax, but I mean, there's no doubt about it. This is a fantastic value. The Ardbeg Spectacular, the committee release earlier this year, was about $130 plus tax. There was, as I mentioned, there's some older whiskey in there, but it's lower ABV, less of a cask influence, a little bit more subtle. Very good. Gave that one a 7 out of 10. That was a solid whiskey, maybe one of the better Ardbeg releases that I've at least tasted recently. But this goes above and beyond that. The fact that you can probably pick this up for about $100 is fantastic. Now, for the first time in a few years, this seems to be selling out pretty quickly. K&L sold out of it immediately. I know Benny's had some the other day, still on the shelf, although they have multiple stores all over Illinois. And but this does seem to be flying off the shelves pretty fast. So if you haven't grabbed one already, or if you've missed it, definitely don't hesitate. If you know you like Laphroaig, you like heavily peated cask-influenced whiskeys, this is a must-buy. And a fantastic value overall. And to be honest, it really begs the question, what are all these other distilleries doing? It seems like every year that goes by, more and more of these kind of special release bottlings get panned and kind of, I don't say swept under the rug because people still buy them, but the hype never really picks up. They're expensive. They're not necessarily all that good. I hear Glen Scotia has been getting better with their Campbelltown Malts Festival. I bought the Bordeaux red wine cask, which is, I still have almost the entire bottle, because it's really bad. And that turned me off of that. I've heard that the last couple editions of the Glen Scotia release have been pretty damn good. So I'll probably grab one of those here one of these days. I think I can still buy them all. They still sit on the shelf, even from maybe a year or two ago. So we'll see. But it just seems like, especially compared to like an Ardbeg, this is what the people want. And yeah, not every edition is going to be as hyped or as sought after, but you're getting something different. It's going to be a high quality. It's going to showcase the Laphroaig spirit in a different light every single year. It's generally speaking going to be affordable, or as affordable as we can ask it to be at this point in time. And they're conversation starters as well. Ardbeg releases are conversation starters, but more often than not, they tend to be negative conversations. For this, even if it's not your favorite release, or last year wasn't your favorite release, or the year before that wasn't your favorite release, you're still going to find something to talk about and appreciate about it, because the special releases are showing the Laphroaig spirit in different situations, under different circumstances, and you can start to get a feel for what that distillery is really capable of. You don't have to feel bad about buying the bottle either. I'd love to see the 10-year-old age statement hang around, but I guess we've kind of moved past that. I'm expecting an age statement on these special releases, particularly from Isla, where they're trying to keep that peaty punch intact. I guess maybe that's a little bit of a pipe dream, but it's great seeing it on the label. It's just kind of a show that that maybe your money is being spent wisely, even though it doesn't really necessarily matter whether it was 8 years old or 9 years old or whatever. But you love to see them have that confidence, and hopefully maybe the success of this bottle, if this is flying off the shelf as quickly as it seems to be, and it's not going to hang around on the shelf for a couple of years, because I can still buy both the Warehouse one and last year's White Port and Madeira edition. I can still go buy those bottles right now today, even seeing the Warehouse one hitting some clearance shelves for like $60, $70. And hey, at least now it's cheaper than the 10-year-old cast strength, even though the 10-year-old cast strength might still actually be technically better. But at least now the lower ABV non-age stated edition is cheaper. So I'd love to see more distilleries take this kind of a approach to their special releases, particularly the ones that are globally available. It seems like a lot of these style of special releases are oftentimes limited to distillery only sort of things, and they certainly don't make it over here to the States. And just finding like an affordable, available release like this that isn't that hard to get if you're paying attention. Even this one, right? If you wanted one and you were keeping an eye out for it, you could probably get one. But and who knows, maybe there'll be another wave of them if maybe people are hedging their bets, the shop owners are hedging their bets because they haven't sold out of the last couple years, which is a shame because I think those bottles were worth getting as well. But yeah, what's your go-to special release? Do you have one where it doesn't matter what it is? As soon as it comes out, you're buying it. I really think the Laphroaig Cairdeas has become my go-to annual release that I look forward to every year because it's fun and everything I've mentioned before. There's many others as well. I don't want to exclude any, but this is definitely entered the I don't care. I'm going to buy one until they let me down, which It's whiskey. It probably will eventually, unfortunately. But thank you again for watching. Again, comment, let me know what you think of Laphroaig Cairdeas and if you have a favorite go-to annual release. And if you haven't already, please leave a like below and hit that sub button. Until next week, everyone, thank you once again.